Hey guys, tonight we drift into a soft breeze of history. Dry reeds rustle, a clay courtyard cools under moonlight, and somewhere nearby, a cow is chewing grass with the quiet dignity of royalty. You're standing at the edge of a Sumerian village near the Euphrates, 4,000 years ago. The mud brick walls curve gently, smoke coils from a humble hearth, and you, somehow, have been invited to stay the night. You're not here for war, or gold, or politics. You're here because a woman named Ninush has written something strange into the annals of history. Something not carved on a palace wall, not sung in the temples, but pressed lovingly into soft clay and left behind for someone. Possibly for you. Possibly for a cow. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. Always curious to know where in the world you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking through the village just after sunset. The heat has drained from the air, and even the goats are lying flat against the warm earth. There's a distinct smell, smoke, wet straw, maybe a bit of fermented barley. It's familiar, even if it's the first time you've been here. Ahead, a pen of animals stands nestled against a wall. One of them, tall, a little too poised for a normal cow, turns her head slowly and looks at you. Really looks. Wide lashes, dappled hide, a slight twitch of the ear as if acknowledging your soul. It's unnerving, yes, but mostly, majestic. You don't want to be weird about this, but she's kind of beautiful. You notice the villagers glance at her as they pass. Some murmur. Some pause. One little boy offers her a stolen figure. And all the while, she continues chewing, utterly unbothered, the serene center of this village's quiet chaos. She has a name, but you won't learn it yet. You step closer to the pen, and as your foot lands in a soft patch of earth, it makes a faint squelch. Clay. Wet, pliable clay. Something sticking out, a corner of something square and sun-hardened. You crouch down, gently brushing dirt aside. There, unmistakably, is a small cuneiform tablet, smooth on one side, tiny wedge-shaped marks on the other. A love letter. And you're fairly certain it's not addressed to a person. This is where your journey begins. Now, a quick refresher, the Sumerians weren't just inventors of writing and beer, they were also the originators of bureaucracy, record-keeping, and, apparently, cross-species emotional attachment. This tablet isn't part of any known epic. It's not inscribed with tax data or war spoils. Instead, it contains metaphors about grazing patterns and declarations of love that mention cud. You read the lines slowly, letting the meaning rise like mist from a morning marsh. The author speaks of eyes round as the full barley moon, of a voice that soothes the calf and cuts through my dreams, and, nostrils like twin temples of breath. Bold. You can't help but imagine the moment of composition, someone seated under a fig tree, stylus in hand, overcome with longing? Admiration? Really strange taste. Historians still argue whether this was earnest affection, satire, or some kind of ancient poetic exercise. There's no clear answer. But the emotion in the strokes is unmistakable, gentle, deliberate, and maybe a little desperate. The villagers don't seem too surprised when you ask about the tablet. One man, toothless and grinning, says something about that scribbler from the temple who talks to the cow more than to people. Another gestures vaguely toward the ziggurat, mumbling something about clay and heartbreak. You get the feeling that everyone knows the story, but no one quite agrees on what happened. Still holding the tablet, you glance back at the cow. She's wandered closer now, her heavy hooves nearly silent on the packed earth. She blinks slowly at you. You think, just maybe, you understand. This cow was once loved. Not metaphorically. Literally. And someone carved that love into time itself. Now you're caught in it, too. You hold the tablet carefully, its edges worn by time but its script still crisp, each wedge-shaped mark angled like a whisper frozen in clay. It's heavier than it looks, cool against your palms, like it remembers being handled with trembling hands and a racing heart. You imagine the scribe who wrote it. Someone young, or maybe not. Nervous. Definitely sleep-deprived. Probably with ink-stained fingers and grass in her hair. She had to wait for the right moment, when no one was watching, when the priest wasn't hovering over her shoulder with a list of temple inventory, and when the cow happened to be standing in full view, gently illuminated by the Sumerian moon. And so, she wrote. The tablet, though only a few inches across, reads like a love song. It opens not with the usual Sumerian ceremonial flair, no appeal to gods or ancestors, just a line that hits you in the gut. To the one who chews with patience and walks like water. You're not sure if you should be charmed or deeply concerned, but you keep reading. There's mention of the cow's morning routine, the exact moment she blinks as the sun rises, the way her tail flicks in rhythm when flies gather near the feeding trough. The scribe speaks of yearning, but not in the typical romantic sense. It's more devotional. Reverent, like the cow is both muse and deity, a creature more constant than people, more honest than the priesthood. There's a stanza comparing the cow's chewing to the steady beat of a ceremonial drum. That one really makes you stop. Who compares cud munching to percussion? Apparently, Ninush does. You now know her name. It's pressed faintly into the tablet's final line, tucked like a signature, Ninush, humble keeper of words and watcher of hooves. Poetic to the end. The clay smells faintly of oil and damp soil. It was fired low, probably in a village kiln, not intended to last forever. And yet, here it is. Dug up centuries later by your clumsy foot. Historians still argue whether this particular piece of writing qualifies as a poem, a private journal, or, perhaps, a form of early pastoral comedy. Some believe it was a dare, a late-night writing challenge among apprentices. Others argue for sincerity, pointing to the detailed anatomical observations and earnest repetition of grass-related imagery. And then there's the fringe camp, those who believe Ninush was practicing a sacred rite, one tied to ancient animal worship, that her words weren't romantic so much as ritual. A devotional offering to the spirit of fertility and milk. But you? You just see a girl who was captivated. Not by wealth, or power, or even a man. But by a creature that embodied tranquility in a way no human could. You walk back toward the cow's pen. She's lounging now, half asleep herself, chewing the cud with that slow, meditative rhythm that poets and monks alike have envied for millennia. You lean against the wooden rail and wonder if she knows. If she remembers the girl who used to sit nearby, murmuring verses and sketching hearts in the dirt with a stylus. From a nearby window, a woman peeks out. Her eyes follow your gaze, and she lets out a short laugh. Still reading her poetry, she calls softly. That cow never blinked twice at anyone else. You ask her what she means, and she waves you over. Her name is Eris. She's old now, joints like dry rope, but her mind still sharp. She pours you something that might be barley tea and motions for you to sit on a low stone bench. Ninush, she says, with a slight smile. Oh yes. Temple scribe. Lived with her aunt. Quiet type. Talked too fast when she was nervous, which was always. You ask if the cow had a name. She called her Shulgi's gift. No one else did. We just called her Ba. Short for Basu, since she wandered off a lot. She goes quiet, then adds, that cow once stopped a wedding procession by just standing in the road. Ninush took it as a sign. Spent 3 days composing a poem about it. Honestly, we thought she'd marry a priest. Turns out she was already taken. Eris laughs softly and stirs the tea. The sun dips lower. The tablet still rests in your lap, its presence solid, warm now from your hands. You ask if anyone else ever wrote love poems to cows. Eris raises an eyebrow. Not that we found. But if they did, theirs didn't survive. Hers did. And maybe that's the real magic. Not the cow, not the poem, but the permanence of an emotion strange enough to last 4,000 years. Encased in clay. Undeniable. You glance one more time toward Ba. She's still chewing, completely unfazed by your presence, your questions, or her literary fame. That might be the most beautiful part. You wake before dawn, the Sumerian air still cool, stars fading into the dusty lavender sky. The village stirs quietly, someone begins to grind grain in a stone bowl, a rooster half-heartedly crows, and Ba the cow stretches, shifts, and lets out the gentlest snort. You sit up from your woven mat and remember, the tablet, the girl, the cow, the oddly stirring poem. The name Ninush still hovers in your mind, like a note hummed in a forgotten lullaby. It's time to find out more. You pocket the tablet. Don't worry, everyone's surprisingly chill about you carrying ancient artifacts, and head toward the ziggurat, the temple complex at the village's edge. If anyone knew Ninush, it would be the priest-scribes who trained her. The sun begins to rise as you walk, light catching on the mud brick walls, making everything glow like honey. A young novice is sweeping dust from the temple steps, humming to herself. You ask her, in the most polite Sumerian you can muster, about Ninush. She tilts her head. The girl who used to write about animals? Yes, you say. Especially, one particular cow. Oh, she says with a smirk. Her. Inside the temple archives, cool and dark, a senior priest greets you. He smells like ink and dried reeds, with hands permanently stained from stylus work. When you mention Ninush, he waves toward a corner stacked with unlabeled clay tablets. Bottom row, under the festival records, he says. She wasn't officially copied into the temple's canon. But we didn't throw them away either. You kneel and begin sifting. It's like flipping through an emotional diary written entirely in triangles and lines. Some tablets are logistical, grain tallies, lists of goats, overdue library loans. But in one little stack, set aside from the rest, her voice emerges again. One tablet opens with, "To the beast who looks away when I speak, yet always listens." Another simply reads, "I followed her shadow for 10 paces before I realized I had wept." These are not the grand epics of kings or storm gods. These are fragments of someone watching the mundane and choosing to find mystery in it. You smile. This wasn't about obsession. It was about noticing, deeply, intensely, exhaustively noticing. Historians still argue whether Ninush's writings signal an early form of emotional literature or if they were just exercises, warm-ups before copying temple hymns. But you suspect they were something more. Private musings, too tender for public ritual. The cow may have been muse, yes, but also maybe metaphor. Or maybe just, a cow. Either way, the feeling was real. You find one more tablet, almost comically small, like a pocket poem. She licked my hand once. I wrote 100 lines about it. And that's all. Back outside, the temple novice laughs when you share it. She really did that, you ask. Oh yes, she says. She'd get a new tablet just because Ba sneezed. But beneath the teasing, there's a trace of admiration. You sense it in the way she handles the fragments you show her, carefully, almost reverently. You ask what happened to Ninush. She finished her training, the novice says. But she didn't stay. Said the temple was too full of prayers she didn't feel anymore. Where did she go? The novice shrugs. North, maybe. Or west. With the barley caravans. People say she took a stylus, a sack of tablets, and a cow figurine made of lapis. Said it looked just like Ba. You wonder if she ever wrote again. If some traveler will one day dig up more tablets in another village, hymns to goats, sonnets to pigeons. One can hope. You walk back toward Ba's pen. She's not there. Just a clean circle of flattened grass and the faint scent of hay. A chill runs through you, not of fear, just anticipation. Something is shifting. The village seems to feel it too. Women peer out of doorways, a boy runs toward the fields, and someone points toward the river. And now you understand, Ninush didn't just write about a cow. She made people notice a cow. She changed its place in the world, even if just a little. Through clay, through metaphor, through absurd and tender devotion. And now you're in it, too, part of the story, tablet in hand, heart oddly full. You find her by the river. Ba stands ankle-deep in the slow-moving water, staring at her own reflection with the vacant majesty of a creature who's never had to question her place in the cosmos. You ease down onto a warm flat stone nearby, trying not to make a sound. The river hums with low insects, frogs bloop in the shallows, and somewhere behind you, someone plays a reed flute out of tune. You look at Ba and think of Ninush, hunched over her stylus, watching this exact scene and finding something holy in it. You remember a line from one of the smaller tablets in the archive. I named her after a king, but she rules nothing. Still, she accepts my offering. Was that it? The whole point? That devotion didn't need reciprocation or reward? That Ninush offered her words not to win the cow's affection, but simply because it felt right? Historians still argue whether Sumerians truly anthropomorphized animals or simply described them with reverent utility. But the fringe theory persists that among some temple scribes, especially younger ones, there was a tradition of offering through observation. The idea that to watch something deeply and write about it was itself an act of praise. You begin to suspect that this was not just about a cow. It was about stillness. About being fully present. A breeze stirs the reeds. Ba flops down with a huff, sending up a spray of glittering droplets. One lands on your knee. She doesn't notice you. Of course she doesn't. She's just a cow. And yet, you look down and see hoofprints pressed into the muddy bank, hundreds, overlapping. A history of meandering. Some are deep, from heavier seasons. Some barely kiss the surface, as if she'd tiptoed through a dream. There's something about it that moves you more than it should. You reach into your satchel and gently slide out Ninush's original tablet. The text winks up at you like a shared secret. You reread the line you now know by heart. If she knew my name, I'd stop writing. But she doesn't. So I write. The logic is flawless. Immortal. A soft voice speaks behind you. She always came here when Ninush was upset. You turn. It's Eris again, holding a crooked staff and a small basket of date cakes. She sits beside you, joints creaking like old papyrus. She thought this spot was magic, Eris continues, offering you a cake. Said the cow chose it for a reason. That cows understand serenity in ways people forget. You chew in silence. The date cake tastes like sleep and sugar. Eris nods toward the hoofprints. She followed those once, all the way to the marsh. Got lost for 2 days. Came back with a new poem and leeches on her ankles. You laugh softly. Was she happy? Eris tilts her head. No. But she was curious. That's better, I think. You ask what she thinks Ninush would say if she saw the tablet survive all this time. Eris smiles. She'd be furious. Said her cow poems were practice for real writing. I told her that's what made them real. You sit with that. Ba lets out a long, low sigh and curls her body down into the soft silt, eyes half closed. She looks like a boulder sculpted by peace. You understand Ninush now. Or at least, you think you do. You get why someone might fall in love, not with the cow itself, but with what the cow didn't demand. The cow never spoke, never lied, never rushed. It chewed. It blinked. It stood still long enough to let a girl learn the rhythm of her own breathing. Ba flicks her tail and your hand instinctively sketches the motion in the air, as if you might one day need to remember it. Eris finishes her cake. You know, she says slowly, some people thought Ninush was strange. You nod. She probably was. But, she says, brushing crumbs from her lap, so was Enheduanna. So was every scribe who ever dared to write something no one asked for. You watch the river pull light across the surface, and you realize something important. Ba doesn't care that she inspired a poem. But the poem exists anyway. And so, perhaps, do you? The sun begins its gentle climb toward noon, and the village moves around you in slow, sleepy swirls. A boy drags a basket of figs through the alleyway. A pair of women argue cheerfully about barley fermentation ratios. Someone shouts at a goat that's wandered onto a rooftop. But none of this disturbs Ba, who is now very committed to a nap. You rise from your rock and stretch your arms. Something in you feels different now, not quite wiser, but softer around the edges. And curiouser. You want to know what else Ninush wrote, not just about the cow, but about life. About temple duties, about loneliness, about anything. You decide to pay a visit to the old potter. If anyone's kept stories in clay besides the temple scribes, it's her. She lives in a narrow courtyard shaded by a fig tree that seems too old to still bear fruit, but does anyway. Her name is Nidintu, though the children call her Crackfinger for how her joints snap when she works the wheel. She doesn't say much when you arrive, just points at a stool, hands you a lump of damp clay, and tells you to sit. You try to shape something. It becomes a lopsided bird or possibly a broken gourd. Either way, she nods approvingly. She used to sit there too, Nidinta says, without specifying who. But you already know. She made tiny cows, the old woman adds. Hundreds of them. Some fat, some lean. One with wings, for some reason. You ask what happened to them. People took them. Or crushed them. That's how it goes. She hands you a piece, smooth, palm-sized, still faintly blue from the lapis traces Ninush must have mixed in. A sleeping cow, head tucked, legs folded. Piece in miniature. You run your thumb across its flank. Did she really write poems to it? Oh yes, Nidinta says, as if it's the most obvious thing in the world. She said if clay could carry grain and wine, it could carry longing too. You sit with that. A pot cracks in the kiln behind you. Nidinta doesn't flinch. She also talked to the clay, she mutters. Whispered things into it before it dried. Like wishes. A shiver runs up your neck. You stare at the figurine, half expecting it to blink. Later that day, you help Nidinta glaze bowls. The air smells like smoke and something lemony. Your fingers are covered in slip, and you realize this is what Ninush must have felt, earth and water mixing under her palms, forming shapes no one else had imagined until she touched them. Historians still argue whether figurines like Ninush's were offerings, playthings, or early storytelling tools. One fringe theory posits they were part of a forgotten ritual called Jisjajarayu, the silent sculptures, where young scribes expressed forbidden thoughts through clay rather than on tablets. You look at the figurine again and wonder what secrets it might hold, hardened beneath its glaze. You should keep it, Nidinta says quietly. It likes you. You try to thank her, but she's already gone inside, muttering something about beeswax and broken jars. So now you have a cow. You tuck it into your satchel beside Ninush's original tablet and make your way back through the village. The afternoon heat makes everything buzz, the stones under your feet, the papyrus leaves, your own bones. You pass a group of children drawing in the dirt with twigs. One draws a cow. Another draws a person beside it with very long arms. Ninush, one of them says, pointing at the figure. You pause. You know about her? Of course, the child says. She's the girl who fell in love with a cow. You start to correct them, to explain that no, it was more complicated, more poetic, more layered, more. But you stop. Because maybe that version is just as true. You sit with them and ask what they know. She made the cow talk, one says. She gave it a crown, says another. She gave it soup, says a third, probably misremembering. And yet, somehow, every child here knows her name. They draw her in the dust, their faces sticky with honey and dust, and for a moment, Ninush feels more alive than she ever could have imagined. Not because she wrote the perfect poem, but because someone remembers. And because that memory, however distorted, is joyful. By nightfall, the village sighs into its quieter rhythms. A fire crackles in the central square, and someone is roasting lentils in a blackened pot. The moon hangs low, like it too has grown heavy with stories. You return to the archive, where the door moans like a reluctant camel. Inside, the cool darkness wraps around you like damp linen, and the familiar scent of dust, resin, and old oil lamp seeps into your lungs. You light a small clay lamp and place it beside your reading mat. The cow figurine rests beside you, its eyes half closed in eternal indifference. You open Ninush's main tablet again, not the poem, but a second one, less polished, more like a draft journal. You hadn't noticed it before because it was tucked beneath a cracked ledger labeled, Grain Surplus, Year of the Drunk Donkey. This tablet reads more like confessions than literature. You begin to whisper the lines aloud, letting the words settle into the chamber. Today, she leaned against the wall and licked a cool spot. I watched. It was nothing. It was everything. The priest said I write too much about her. But I think he's jealous. He doesn't have anything he loves without needing it to love him back. I touched her once. Just the tip of her ear. She didn't move. I think that was the holiest moment of my year. There's no structure, no stylized meter, just raw thought pressed into clay. And yet it stirs you more than the formal poem did. You notice something scratched in the corner, almost like a code, 3 tiny triangles, pointing upward. A scribe symbol, maybe. Or a signal. One of the librarians once told you such markings could indicate a hidden draft, a private layer under the official text. Historians still debate whether scribes kept dual records, one for public reading, another hidden, raw and personal. Some believe entire layers of Sumerian history lie just beneath what we've already read, encoded in marginalia, footnotes, or stylus strokes too faint to matter, until they do. You pull out a rubbing cloth and press gently, scanning for pressure patterns. And there it is, a hidden inscription under the top layer, pressed harder and deeper, as though Ninush wrote it before the poem above and never meant to show it. I don't want her to speak. I just want her to stay. It hits like a whispered prayer. You sit back, stunned by its simplicity. How many of us have felt that way? Toward a pet, a person, a moment? Wishing not for grandeur or return, but simply preservation. Ninush wasn't in love with the cow. She was in love with silence. With presence. With the simple miracle of something existing peacefully nearby. You roll onto your back and stare at the arched ceiling. Somewhere above you, bats shift in their rafters. The wind pushes softly at the window slats. You think about how many tablets in this archive have gone unread, untranslated, or just ignored because they don't fit the official narrative of empire building, tax keeping, or royal edicts. But what if the real heart of Sumerian life was found in these side thoughts? In one girl's daily noticing of a cow who didn't ask anything from her? You turn to the cow figurine. She doesn't respond. She doesn't need to. You whisper, she stayed, Ninush. She stayed long enough for me to find her. There's something enormously restful about that idea. Like a thread has been tied between your ribcage and the past. Not a tight thread, just enough to feel. You stretch out on the mat, the lamp guttering. For the first time in a while, you don't feel the need to write anything. You simply rest there, listening to the archive breathe around you. And then you hear it. A scraping sound. Slow. Purposeful. You sit up, heart skipping. It's coming from the western shelf, the oldest part of the archive. Where the unstable clay was stored. Where you were told never to go unless escorted. The sound stops. You wait. It doesn't come again. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe it wasn't. You glance at the cow. Still sleeping. Still sacred. Still hers. You don't sleep much that night. Instead, you lie curled beside your lamp, the cow figurine tucked in the crook of your arm like a talisman against the scratching sounds that, yes, start up again, sporadically. Sometimes near. Sometimes far. Sometimes clearly not from this building at all. By morning, the archive seems normal again. Or as normal as a place filled with millennia-old sighs can ever seem. You decide it's time to take a walk outside the walls. You head for the outer fields where the herders pass with their goats and oxen, where the tamarisk trees lean like gossiping aunties, and where no one is especially interested in your purpose. A shepherd boy, maybe 9, waves at you as you approach. He's holding a flute carved from bone and trying to teach a goat to dance. The goat is not interested. You come for the cow, the boy asks, as if this is the most natural question in the world. You hesitate. You know the story. She belonged to the temple first, he says, not bothering to introduce himself. Then to the priest's brother. Then to Ninush. That's what my grandfather said. This doesn't quite match the temple records, which list the cow simply as an offering gone feral. No ownership. No transfer. Just a creature who wandered the border between sacred and stray. The boy scratches behind the goat's ear. They said she never got sick. Even when the river rose. Even when the grain went moldy. She just stayed calm. Like she was already in paradise. You take out the figurine and show it to him. His eyes widen. That's her, he says. That's Buru. A name. Finally. It fits, somehow, soft and solid, like a lowing breath. Did Ninush name her, you ask? No. The cow told her. You nearly laugh, but the boy's face is serious. Too serious for a joke. I mean, he adds, that's what she wrote. And here comes another mystery. You thought you had read all of Ninush's surviving work. But none of it included this name, or this moment, or this small, wondrous claim that the cow spoke. So you ask the boy, where did you hear that? He points, not toward the archive, but toward a withered tree at the edge of the field, surrounded by stone markers that look like forgotten fence posts. She buried it, he says. The last one. The story the priest didn't like. My grandfather found it and copied it into the sand before it cracked. This is either complete fantasy or the most valuable clue you've gotten yet. And either way, you follow. The boy leads you through tall grasses that scratch your shins. The sun is rising behind you, casting your shadow long and uncertain. At the base of the tree, half swallowed by mud and time, lies a sliver of fired clay. It's not much. Maybe the size of a crust of bread. But it's inscribed, and the markings are definitely Ninush's hand, sharp, looping, a little showy. You brush away the dirt. Only one phrase remains legible. And when I asked her name, she breathed, Buru. You sit in silence, awed by the directness of it. No metaphor. No symbolism. Just a sacred act of listening. Historians still argue whether animals were seen as divine messengers in everyday Sumerian life or merely symbols used for ritual metaphors. But every once in a while, a tablet like this surfaces, unofficial, unsanctioned, that suggests a quieter, more personal relationship. Not the cow as offering. Just the cow as herself. You spend a long while beside the tree. The boy plays his bone flute again, this time a little better, though the goat still refuses to dance. When you return to the village, something has shifted in you. Buru now has a name. Ninush now has another poem. And you are beginning to feel less like a visitor to this story and more like a character inside it. You return the cow figurine to its shelf, only to pull it back down moments later. No. Not yet. You tuck her into your satchel again, careful not to knock her ear on the edge of your writing tools. You're starting to understand why Ninush kept her close. There's more here than metaphor. There's presence. There's a whisper that stretches across centuries. There's a question, unanswered. Why do we remember some things, and let others dissolve? You return to the archive late in the day, walking slower than usual. The streets of the village are nearly empty, save for a basket vendor picking out bad figs, and an old man humming to his pigeons from a rooftop. The sun dips behind the western wall, and the wind picks up a little, bringing with it the sour-sweet smell of fermented dates and drying reeds. Inside, the archive feels different. Warmer. Not physically, but emotionally, as if the clay walls themselves are leaning in now, curious to hear what you've discovered. You sit again at the long low table and unroll your waxed linen note pouch. One by one, you place your findings in front of you, the cow figurine, the new rubbing from the field tablet, a copied verse from Ninush's hidden draft. It's becoming something bigger. Not just a collection of oddities, but the beginnings of a life reconstructed. You remember the shepherd boy's words, "She belonged to the temple first." That odd phrase stays with you. So you go digging. You start in the back section, where temple animal inventories are kept. Most of them are dull: 3 goats for purification, 1 ox for lunar rites, 2 ducks, stolen, presumed drowned. But then, tucked into the corner of a warped scroll case, you find a curious record. It's not in a formal register, but in the margin of an accounting tablet, squeezed in as if the scribe didn't want it to be easily noticed. Cow with black ears taken from pen. Refused sacrifice. Tied herself to temple gatepost and remained 2 days unmoved. Priest deemed it omen. Transferred to novice scribe for care. You feel a chill, not fear, just the uncanny sense of a puzzle clicking into place. This cow, Buru, refused to die. And instead of being slaughtered, she was handed off to a young trainee. A novice. A girl. Ninush. It's not standard procedure. Not even close. Historians still debate how much autonomy women had in the priesthoods of Uruk and Eridu, but this moment seems personal, off-script. As if a silent agreement passed between 2 living beings, one who refused an ending, and one who didn't want hers to begin. And so Buru became Ninush's companion. You press further, flipping through more miscellaneous records, chasing every mention of temple livestock with strange annotations. Another entry, months later. Cow continues to follow novice. Interferes with processions. Allowed near scriptorium to avoid disruptions. You almost laugh. Buru wasn't tamed, she was accommodated. And even later. Novice writes on her behalf. Scrolls not approved for canon. Stored in box, beneath the eyes. Beneath the eyes. You scan the archive ceiling, and sure enough, there's a wooden box affixed to the wall just below a mural of 3 painted eyes. It's old, mold-streaked, and sealed with wax that's cracked with age. You climb the ladder slowly. Carefully. You've done this 100 times, but tonight feels different. More sacred. More real. Inside the box are 4 slim tablets, bound in palm rope. On each is the same header. Accounts from Buru, recorder, Ninush. You climb down with trembling fingers and lay the tablets out on your mat. The script is smaller than her usual style, and softer. Like someone writing for themselves, not for posterity. You read aloud. Today she sneezed. I said bless you before I could stop myself. I think she laughed. She tried to chew my stylus. I let her. It tasted like cedar and ink. She didn't seem impressed. When I couldn't write, she leaned her head against mine. We stayed like that until the lamp burned out. These are not just stories. These are companionship, written in clay. And for the first time, you realize, this wasn't just about love, or reverence, or boredom. This was about resistance. About refusing to let a being be reduced to their function. Ninush didn't write about Buru because she was strange. She wrote because Buru had a life no one else would record. A life of waiting. Watching. Being. A life most people would forget, unless someone like Ninush wrote it down. You glance at your own notes, scrolls, rubbings, copies. It hits you that you've become Ninush's second scribe. Her echo. The lamp flickers. You hear the scratch again. Only this time, you don't flinch. You listen. It's softer now. Almost rhythmic. Like breathing. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's something else. But the figurine stays warm in your hand. And the story, her story, keeps unfolding, line by line. In the hush of the archived night, you wake up with clay dust on your cheek and the scent of burnt sesame oil in the air. At some point, you must have drifted off right there on the archive floor, cradling the last of Ninush's tablets like a pillow. Not the most ergonomic sleep of your life, but surprisingly comforting. As if the old room had accepted your presence. You sit up slowly, stretch, and watch a spider cross the rim of your lamp. Outside, someone is already boiling onions for breakfast. Inside, the only sound is your breath and the low, soft creak of wooden beams remembering how to be a roof. The 4 Buru tablets, as you now call them, are still exactly where you left them. You scan them again, looking for connections, repetitions, anything you missed in your half-sleep haze. And then, on the final tablet, near the bottom, you notice a peculiar symbol etched in the margin, 2 tiny wedges, side by side. Not a word. Not a letter. A mark. You flip through your lexicon for cuneiform signs, but it's not standard. You check your personal notes, no luck. So you try something different. You line up the edges of all 4 tablets and lay them side by side. And there it is. The wedges line up. They form a subtle but intentional map. Not a geographic map, but a diagram. A pattern in the way the cow walked, maybe. Or the direction she faced. Or a prayer sequence only 2 people ever knew. You trace it with your finger. The flow arcs like a spiral, then stops. At the center, 1 word. Tamsi. It's not Buru's name. You know that now. This is something else. A verb? A god? A joke? You flip back through Ninush's earlier writings and find the word again, once, in the corner of a ceremonial hymn. Tamsi is the closing of the vessel, the peace at the gate. Now you're truly intrigued. Historians still argue whether Tamsi referred to an agricultural rite, a lost deity, or a metaphor for final breath. But in this context, it seems quiet. Private. A gesture rather than a declaration. You step outside the archive to clear your head, the cow figurine tucked once again into your satchel. It's becoming a ritual. Carry her, think better. And today, your walk leads you not toward the city, but away. Toward the marshes. You follow the reed path as it squishes beneath your feet, passing herons and dragonflies who treat you as just another passing breeze. A mud skipper regards you with suspicion. Fair enough, you haven't showered in days, and you're mumbling to yourself about ancient cow diagrams. Eventually, you find what you didn't know you were looking for, a stone platform half sunken in the marsh. A ruin, barely a memory. Just 3 standing stones and a slab carved with that same Tamsi symbol. You kneel. You press the figurine gently to the slab. And just for a moment, you swear you hear a low sound. A breath. A sigh. Probably your own. Still, you sit there a while. The tablet implied this place mattered. Perhaps this was the field where Buru first refused the knife. Perhaps Ninush brought her here to graze. Perhaps they watched the sun set over the river and invented words together. You leave no offering. You take no clay rubbing. You just sit. Because sometimes history isn't about collecting data, it's about not looking away. When you return to the archive, you feel lighter. Not triumphant. Not accomplished. Just right. Like you did the thing you were supposed to do, even if no one but you, and maybe one silent cow, would know it. That evening, you take a reed pen and begin your own tablet. You keep it simple. Quiet. Honest. You write. She was not sacred, but she was seen. And that feels like enough. At least for now. You look up at the mural of the 3 painted eyes above the archive door. They seem to blink slowly in the lamplight. You nod back. Later that night, as shadows lengthen and the oil lamp burns low, you begin to wonder, not about Buru this time, but about Ninush herself. Not her words or her stylus strokes, but the person behind them. What did she look like when she laughed? Did she hum as she wrote? Did she have a friend other than the cow, or was Buru it? You rummage through the drawer of priesthood rosters, a heavy, dull stack of predictable records, initiates, failed initiates, disciplinary actions for misusing temple ink. It's dry stuff. Until you reach a small sealed envelope marked with a faded red thumbprint, an unusual touch. Most official seals use cylinders, not flesh. Inside, a single, folded tablet. It's a review. A performance evaluation, essentially. Addressed from an older priest scribe named Enketer to the senior archivist. Novice Ninush demonstrates excessive independence in her narrative transcriptions. She inserts emotional references and speculates beyond record. She insists her cow can interpret tone. You snort quietly. Can interpret tone is priceless. You keep reading. Despite this, her stylus control is advanced. She shows signs of unusual memory retention. Requests more tablets than allotted. Requests extra ink. Found writing after sunset. Recommendation, observe, but do not interfere. It's not exactly glowing praise. But also not a dismissal. They saw her. They didn't understand her, but they saw her. Historians still argue whether young scribes like Ninush had creative license or were expected to copy texts verbatim. You suspect she danced between both. Bending the rules, not breaking them. Using official temple ink to tell unofficial animal stories. A quiet rebellion under the guise of diligence. You wonder what happened after the cow died. Or after Ninush left. Was there grief? Was there ceremony? Or just silence? You scan the morning records. There's a list of temple funerals for scribes and functionaries. Most are unnamed or referred to by title only. But one entry stands out, 33 years after the Buru tablets. Memorial for Ninush, cow wife. Small procession. 3 scribes attended. No family listed. Cow wife. You blink. It's not an insult. Not here. Not then. In Sumerian, the phrasing, Damalu, could also mean beloved of the beast or keeper of the sacred animal. It's complicated. Language is always more than one thing at once. You sit with the phrase. Cow wife. Was it mockery? Devotion? A badge of honor? Maybe all 3. You picture her older now. Still scribbling, probably, even if no one asked her to. Maybe she still kept a lock of Buru's hair, if cows can be said to have hair. Maybe she whispered her stories to Clay long after anyone stopped reading. Maybe she never stopped waiting for someone, like you, to find them. You suddenly feel the weight of it all. Not sadness, exactly, but the heaviness of continuity. Of being one link in a chain that started with clay and hoofprints and the scratch of stylus on damp earth. You lie back on the archive floor again. This time, eyes open. You stare at the beams above. You think of the cow. You think of the girl. You think of how quiet a rebellion can be. You think of the phrase carved into the fourth Buru tablet. She lay beside me, warm as truth. It's not religious. It's not political. It's just real. And real, sometimes, is the most sacred thing you can write. You fall asleep with the waxed envelope still in your hand. And in your dream, someone nudges your shoulder with a soft nose. When you wake, the dream lingers. You don't remember much, only the press of a soft forehead against yours, the sound of breath, and the faintest bell chime echoing through high reeds. Maybe it was Buru. Maybe it was just your imagination filling in the gaps with kindness. You sit up slowly, joints creaking, as if the centuries of Sumerian dust have finally settled into your bones. There's a subtle hush in the archive now. Not absence, not emptiness, just a pause. Like the room is waiting for your next move. So you move. You begin the slow, methodical process of copying Ninush's Buru tablets into your own notebook. Not translating, copying. Preserving her hand, her rhythm, her odd emphases and strange, meandering syntax. You even leave her misspellings intact. Because somehow, even the errors feel part of the love. And midway through tablet 2, you notice something you hadn't before. A repeated pair of words. Eridug Zoo. It shows up 3 times. And you dismissed it each time before, assuming it was a direction, maybe a local landmark. But now you stare at it longer. Eridug Zoo doesn't just mean south of Eridug. It can also mean, in a certain poetic context, you, my lost city. Your heart stirs. Because Sumerian is tricky like that, compressed meanings, metaphors stacked like bricks. The word for cow is sometimes also the word for sister. The word for field is sometimes also the word for skin. The word for dust is sometimes also the word for kiss. Historians still argue whether this elasticity was intentional artistry or just poor standardization. But here, in Ninush's hand, it feels deliberate. You, my lost city. She wasn't writing about a cow's location. She was writing about devotion. And as you flip back, with that new lens, it becomes clear, the tablets weren't just love letters. They were confessions. A kind of sacred diary smuggled into public records. There's a line that hits you especially hard, now with new eyes. When I fed her by hand, I remembered how to be alive. It isn't funny anymore. It's not silly. It's devastating. Because behind the jokes and the pastoral metaphors and the made-up cow deities, there's something real here. Loneliness, maybe. A need to be needed. A connection forged without permission. And something about that, a young Sumerian scribe sneaking her rawest thoughts into a temple archive that would outlive her by thousands of years, makes your throat tighten. You need air. So you take the cow figurine once again, your increasingly loyal little pocket talisman, and step outside. You head toward the market, where life goes on, oblivious to lost cows and ancient metaphors. The vendors are shouting. Children chase geese. Someone is playing a double-piped flute badly. And then, in the corner of the spice section, you see it. A cow. A real one. Tethered lazily to a fig tree, chewing rhythmically and blinking slowly, as if it's been waiting for you this whole time. You freeze. It's ridiculous. It's just a cow. But something about the way she looks at you, a flick of the ear, a tilt of the head, makes you take out the figurine from your satchel and hold it up. The cow snorts. then yawns, and flops into the dirt like an old dog. You laugh, quietly, careful not to disturb her nap. Because maybe that's what Ninush wanted most, not to deify her cow. Not to mythologize her. But just to witness her. Fully. To say, I saw you. You mattered. You sit down beside the cow. Not close, just enough that your shadows overlap. And for a while, neither of you moves. No tablets. No translations. Just presence. You'll go back to the archives soon. Finish your work. Seal the records. Maybe write something of your own. But right now, you just sit. Because somewhere in the reeds of your memory, a bell chimes again. And this time, it's for you. You return to the archive at dusk, the last blue light slipping through the high windows like diluted lapis. The air smells of drying reeds and clay dust, comforting, by now. Familiar. Even the silence has become something you wear, like a soft robe stitched from murmured legends and misfiled footnotes. You head straight for the locked cabinet where ceremonial texts are kept. Not because Buru's story is ceremonial, but because you need to see what else Ninush touched. There's a rumor among scribes, half joke, half truth, that if you find more than 3 thumbprints from the same novice across unrelated tablets, you're either dealing with a thief or a visionary. Inside the cabinet, nestled between 2 crumbling hymns to Enki, is a slim, wax-lined case marked only with the symbol for lament. Odd. That classification usually refers to songs for mourning city ruins, not barnyard affairs. You open it carefully. Inside is a single tablet, no wider than your hand, but remarkably detailed. Tiny etchings. Fine lines. No smudges. The title at the top reads, Lament of the Fence Post. You blink. It's written from the perspective of a fence post. Yes. A literal fence post. One that had been standing in Ninush's field, apparently next to Buru's favorite scratching spot. Once, her flanks brushed against me in passing. I felt needed. I kept the jackals out. And later. Now she is gone, and I lean toward the dust. I remember her weight. I remember her silence. You can't help it. You laugh. Not cruelly, not mockingly, but gently. Admiringly. Because of course she did this. Of course Ninush gave the fence post a voice. Why wouldn't she? In her world, everything mattered. Even the wood that held her cows whirled together. Historians still debate whether writings like this were training exercises or secret compositions slipped through cracks in the official canon. Whatever they were, they survived. Not because someone approved them, but because someone loved them enough to not throw them away. You flip the tablet over. There's a small thumbprint pressed into the clay. Ninush's. The same swirled ridge pattern as the envelope seal. You imagine her pressing it down with care, maybe whispering a silly goodbye to the post as she did it. Not for ritual. Not for reward. Just for herself. For Buru. For memory. You tuck the lament of the fence post into your notes, wrapped in soft cloth like something sacred. Because it is, in a way. A record not of grandeur or war or trade routes, but of being. Of seeing. Of noticing the little things long enough to make them last. Back at your desk, you write your own line. I met a girl who wrote for a cow, and now I write for her. You don't know where that sentence will go yet. Maybe nowhere. Maybe into your own set of sleepless ramblings. Maybe into a quiet podcast episode that 1 or 2 strangers will fall asleep to, never knowing the full context, but waking up with a warm feeling they can't quite name. That would be enough. You look at your stylus, chipped and ink-stained. You look at your palm. You press your thumb into the corner of the page. The same way she did. Just once. A soft little promise that says, I was here. I noticed you. I remembered. Outside, the wind rustles the fig leaves again. And somewhere in the deep past, a fence post leans a little closer toward the stars. The next morning, you arrive before dawn. The archive is still asleep, the air cool and still holding last night's hush. You slip in quietly, like you're not supposed to be here, even though you are. It's just that the room feels more sacred now, like you're disturbing a temple by walking on its floorboards. You go straight to the back wall, the one no one ever really investigates. It's filled with the misfits, the broken tablets, the scratched-out drafts, the fragments of fragments. The failed epics. The experimental recipes. The children's doodles. It's the B team. Which means it's also exactly where Ninush would have left her real work. You start combing through the shards one by one. Pieces of chicken scratch hymns. A partial list of donkey names. A rejected prayer to an unknown river god. Then, behind a cracked ledger of barley tax disputes, you find it. Half a tablet. Jagged edge. Faint script. You turn it over. At the top, someone, probably Ninush, had etched a tiny header. New creation story, for Buru. You pause. A creation story? For a cow? You begin to read. The lines are uneven, messy, rushed. But unmistakably hers. In the beginning, there was silence. And the gods longed for something warm to wake them. So they made the cow. With breath like steamed reeds. And hooves soft as dusk. And when the cow opened her eyes, the wind remembered its own name. You stare at the lines. It's not just clever, it's oddly beautiful. A whole cosmology built around a creature most cultures would have butchered, traded, or milked dry. Ninush created a world where the cow was the divine spark. The origin. The sacred center. Historians still argue whether these kinds of myth parodies were allowed, even in jest. Some believe scribes who dabbled in such invention were demoted, or worse. Others argue that creativity was tolerated as long as it stayed hidden in the margins, tucked between accounting logs and death rosters. You suspect Ninush knew where the line was. And just how far she could nudge it before it crumbled. You look at the jagged tablet again. Half missing. The rest smudged. You wish you had the second part. But maybe it was always meant to stop there, like a prayer that fades mid-whisper. Or maybe she broke it on purpose, realizing no ending could do justice to a cow that once slept in her lap. You place the fragment gently on the desk. And you copy it, word for word, stylus trembling just slightly. Because if she took the time to imagine a world where cows were gods, the least you can do is preserve the myth. The room feels warmer somehow. Like Buru might be watching. You think back to your own myths, the ones you grew up with. Sea parting prophets. Talking snakes. Flaming chariots. None of them ever made you feel quite like this, a lump in your throat over a clay cow goddess who breathed wind into the sky. You flip open your notebook and write your own first line. In the beginning, there was a girl who wrote instead of sleeping. You'll figure out the rest later. Maybe. For now, you just sit with her myth in your hands. And somewhere far away, in a field where fence posts speak and reeds hum lullabies, a hoof brushes softly against the dust. That evening, you bring a small lamp to the archive. Not one of the flickering oil kind they used back then, just a modern, quiet glow that hums like a sleepy cricket. You set it beside your growing pile of Ninush's words and artifacts, and it casts a gentle circle of light that makes the room feel smaller. Safer. Almost like you're inside one of the tablets yourself, pressed between lines of cuneiform, half finished, half dreamt. You're not alone. Old Elo, the custodian, pokes his head in. You're still digging up that cow romance, he grumbles, though not unkindly. He drops a wrapped fig pastry beside your elbow. They say the cow ran off to marry a temple goat in Lagash. You smile. Elul, you ask, do you believe a cow could be holy? He shrugs. They can remember faces for years. That's holier than some priests I know. Then he leaves, muttering about broken sandals. You take a bite of the pastry. It's dry, but sweet. Probably stolen from the offerings shelf. You don't ask. You turn back to your work. Because now you're building something. Not just collecting fragments, but shaping a story. A whole quiet world built around a girl who didn't want to worship kings or invent new gods or win favor at court. Just a girl who saw a creature resting in the sun and decided that was enough. That was worth writing about. One of the tablets you uncover tonight is heavily faded, more so than the others. But it contains something different. A small sketch, almost like a margin doodle, a girl crouched beside a cow, both of them asleep. You have to squint, but there's something in the girl's hand. A stylus. And beside the sketch, this single line scratched in careful Sumerian. She stayed until the stars blinked out. You don't even try to decipher it further. You know what it means. Ninush didn't just write Buru's story, she stayed with her. Through the molting seasons. The birthing. The sickness. Maybe even the end. Historians still argue whether Sumerian scribes were allowed to bond emotionally with animals they recorded or observed. Most assume it was frowned upon. But this line changes things. This isn't data collection. It's devotion. You touch the edge of the sketch like it might dissolve. It doesn't. The page holds. So you start writing again, but this time it's not just translation or preservation. It's response. You compose a short passage in Sumerian, not perfect, but close enough. You are not forgotten. The wind still knows your name. And somewhere, a fence post remembers. Then you fold it, and slip it inside your notebook. Not for publishing. Not for your thesis. Just so something of you ends up beside something of her. You look at your lamp. You look at your hands. And for the first time in days, you don't feel tired. Just quiet. Like you've joined a lineage older than dynasties, scribes who stayed up too late for reasons no one else understood. Scribes who left jokes in the margins. Who loved things no one asked them to love. A girl and a cow. That's all it ever was. And somehow, that's enough. Morning arrives, warm and gold-tinted, like the sky itself has exhaled slowly and decided not to rush the day. You wake up with a bit of clay dust on your cheek, having dozed off at your desk. A folded blanket rests on your shoulders, Elul's quiet doing, no doubt. His way of saying, you're one of us now. You stretch, yawn, and blink blearily at the tablet shards scattered across your table like a jigsaw puzzle made of old souls. And then you see it. Buried halfway under the sketch of Ninush and her sleeping cow is a sliver of broken clay with just 2.5 words. To her neighbors. You freeze. Your heart does something odd, a sleepy skip, like a kid caught sleepwalking. Because until now, it's all been inference. Circumstance. Context clues and emotional hunches. But here, finally, are the words from the original tale. To her neighbors. The title wasn't poetic license. Ninush really did write something to her neighbor's cow. And this? This is a piece of it. You shuffle through the surrounding shards. One bears a smudge of stylus marks, unreadable, but matched in curvature. Another has a portion of what might be a hoofprint, or just a warped scribe's flourish. You start piecing them together, hands careful but trembling with delight. Finally, across 3 joined shards, you make out the following. You chew as if each blade were sacred. And maybe they are. I watch you through the slats. That's it. That's all you get. But somehow, it's everything. Because she wasn't just joking or pretending. She was watching. Noticing. Loving, in that wordless way that doesn't ask for anything in return. You imagine her now, crouched behind a crooked fence, hiding her tablet behind her knees as she watched Buru graze. Maybe the neighbor was a priest. Or a merchant. Someone too busy to notice that their cow was someone's muse. Historians still argue whether love letters of this kind were metaphor, satire, or secret diary. Sumerian script doesn't always clarify tone. But here, it doesn't need to. You feel it. That sleepy, sacred softness. The kind of love that isn't loud. Isn't declared. Just, carved. And kept. Your fingers trace the cracked edges. You wonder what the rest of the message said. Was there a goodbye? A blessing? Did she ask the neighbor to care for Buru? Or simply confess, like you might to a fading dream? You lean back and stare at the ceiling. There's a water stain shaped like a fish. You decide it's a good omen. Then, without fully planning it, you reach for a blank tablet and start writing again. Not as a scholar. Not even as a narrator. Just as a sleepy human, writing to someone who'll never read it, but somehow always knew you were coming. To the cow with the sky behind her horns. I hope you forgave me. For watching you too long. And saying too little. You press your thumb gently into the corner. It leaves a mark. The wind stirs, later that day, as the shadows shift and the sun slinks off toward the ziggurats, you find yourself once again outside the archive, this time on a bench carved from pale basalt, warmed by hours of sunlight. You're holding the partial letter in your lap, still wrapped in cloth, still fragile as a breath. Elul joins you with 2 cups of something murky and bitter. Date brew, he says. Good for dreams, bad for deadlines. You clink clay mugs. He eyes the fragment. So. What now? You publish it? Translate it for the university? Submit it to the Journal of Muological Antiquity? You smile, but your answer surprises even you. No. Not yet. Because something in your bones says this isn't finished. Not the tablet. Not the story. Not the thing that's quietly opened inside you. You take a slow sip. It tastes like fermented honey and fence-post splinters. You return to the archive just before dusk. There's something you've been meaning to check, a set of tablets no one's paid attention to in years, labeled only, Civic Animal Ledgers, Temple District, Quarter. Dull on the surface. But you remember Ninush's neighbor was from And a few of these records, judging by the dates, might just overlap with her time. You shuffle through them, tablet by tablet. Lists of feed costs. Stable repairs. Missing goats. But then, toward the bottom, you find something scribbled on the back of one of the ledgers. Not official script. Personal. Someone, maybe even the neighbor, had scrawled a frustrated little note. She keeps staring at the cow like it's reciting prayers. Do I report this? Or marry her? You blink. Then you laugh, softly, carefully. Because now the story isn't one-sided. He noticed. Maybe didn't understand. Maybe teased her for it. But he noticed. Historians still debate the etiquette of early Mesopotamian love triangles, especially when one party is a four-legged herbivore. But what you're holding suggests something far gentler. A triangle made of glances, field grass, and unspoken mutual tolerances. You imagine the neighbor now, scratching his head, watching this stubborn, poetic girl murmur to his livestock as if they were temple scribes. Maybe he found her strange. Maybe sweet. Maybe both. And Buru? Buru probably just chewed the cud, blinked slowly, and let them work it out. Because cows are like that. Wise. Indifferent. Always chewing. You take the ledger, the partial love letter, and the sketch of the girl and her cow, and place them all together in a single cloth-bound folio. Not to archive them. Not yet. You're going to keep them by your bed tonight. Let them whisper while you sleep. Let them write the next part without you. Because some stories, like Buru's, like Ninush's, grow best when left undisturbed. You pack up slowly. Return the lamp. Fold your notes. And before leaving, you pause beside the doorway, run your fingers over the frame, and whisper just loud enough. I hope she got to pet her one last time. Then you turn off the light. And the archive exhales. You return home that night with dust on your sleeves and a strange warmth in your chest. Not the kind of warmth that says something is finished, no, it's the kind that says something old is finally breathing again. Your small apartment is quiet, except for the gentle hum of the fridge pretending to be a distant ziggurat. You set the folio beside your bed, and for a moment you just look at it. This packet of scribbled sketches, mismatched fragments, and a letter to a cow. You feel ridiculous. And yet, you've never felt more sure that something mattered. You wash your hands. Warm water, gentle soap. Like preparing to hold a newborn thought. Then, sitting on the floor, you begin copying the fragments into your own journal, not for publication, not for credit, just so your hands remember the shapes. The curves of her language. The tired way she pressed the stylus just a bit too hard in the corners, as if punctuation could carry emotion. One passage stops you cold. You blink like someone who knows secrets but never tattles. I trust you. I've never said that to a person. You exhale. You think about all the people who've ever loved something quietly. Who've watched a bird every morning and worried when it didn't show up. Who've named a tree. Given their umbrella to a stray cat. Left water for passing foxes. You think maybe the world was always held together by unnoticed gestures like that. Historians still wonder whether such texts were private prayers, jokes, or training exercises in emotional cuneiform. Some think they were whispered rituals, non-sacred, but sacred all the same. You think it doesn't matter what they were meant to be. They were. And that's enough. You glance at the tablet sketch again. You notice something you missed before. The stars. They're scratched in above the girl's head, not the cow's. 5 tiny dots. Like someone was saying, she was the one worth remembering. You don't sleep right away. You lie down and listen to the ambient city noises, horns far away, wind teasing your curtain, a fridge in the throes of a false prophecy. And your thoughts wander back to that ledger, that scribe, that slightly baffled neighbor who didn't know if he was witnessing madness or a new kind of love. You wonder what happened to him. Did he ever speak to Ninush? Did he write back? You imagine he did. Something small. Something clumsy. I don't understand what you see in her. But I like watching you see it. You smile. Because maybe that's what this whole thing was. A record not just of one girl's affections, but of someone watching her fall in love with the world, and learning, slowly, to respect it. You fall asleep without realizing it. The folio is still open. And one of the stars from the sketch seems to twinkle just a little. You wake up to the sound of gentle rain tapping your window like an old friend trying not to intrude. The sky is the color of old linen, soft and stained with dawn. And you? You're still holding your journal, open to that page with the scratched stars and the words you copied the night before. You take a moment. You let it settle in. Then you rise, stretch like a cat left too long in one spot, and make a quiet decision. Today, you're going back to the field. The real one. Where Ninush might have stood. Where the cow might have blinked in the sunlight and the neighbor might have muttered prayers under his breath about nosy poets. The walk there is slow. You don't rush. The museum and archive fade behind you. So does the clamor of tour guides and schoolchildren and the endless hum of air conditioning trying to protect clay that outlived empires. Instead, You move through cracked earth and thistles, past date palms and irrigation trenches now claimed by weeds. You step carefully, not because the ground is dangerous, but because it feels like memory, and you wouldn't want to bruise it. Eventually, you reach the hill. It's not tall. Barely more than a bump. But the locals call it Tel Buru. No plaque. No fence. Just a whispered name and a crooked olive tree growing out of the slope like it got bored of waiting to be remembered. You sit there. Let the breeze comb your hair. Let your heartbeat slow to a rhythm old enough for this place. And then you pull out the letter. The copy, not the original, because even reverence needs boundaries. You read it aloud. Quietly. Just loud enough for the grass to hear. You chew as if each blade were sacred. And as you speak the words, you realize something. You're not just repeating her voice. You're answering it. Historians still debate whether these letters were ever meant to be read aloud, or whether they were internal, meditative texts, a kind of ancient journaling meant to keep the heart from rusting. But here, on this wind-kissed tell, with your breath forming clouds around each syllable, it feels like you're doing exactly what Ninush hoped someone would. Not decoding. Not analyzing. Just listening. You look to the olive tree. A single cow might have grazed here once. Or dozens. You'll never know. But the place remembers. You tuck the copy under a flat stone, dry, safe, just visible enough that someone else might find it. Someone gentle. Someone curious. A small offering. A way of letting go without erasing. Then you stand, brush the dust from your knees, and walk back. You don't look behind you. Because the story is facing forward now. And so are you. That evening, you find yourself in the quietest room of the museum, a side gallery no one bothers with unless they're lost or oddly romantic. Inside is a glass case with cracked figurines, a shelf of spindle whorls, and one lovingly preserved door hinge from what was probably a very proud goat shed. But what draws you in is the light. Soft, yellow, as if the lamps were dimmed in anticipation of dreams. You sit on the bench across from a small tablet display, and for the first time in days, you do nothing. No notes. No translations. No sketches. You just rest. It's in this moment that a thought drifts in, quiet, unannounced. You haven't once asked what Ninush looked like. You've imagined her voice. Her handwriting. Her habits. Her rhythms. But not her face. Not her eyes. And maybe that's exactly how she wanted it. To be remembered not as an image but as a pulse. A thought. A gesture. You smile, and your shoulders loosen in a way they haven't for days. Because maybe this story, the Sumerian who wrote a love letter to her neighbor's cow, was never meant to be dissected. Maybe it was meant to be carried. Softly. Like water in cupped hands. Historians still argue whether emotional expression in early Mesopotamian texts was metaphor or genuine sentiment. Whether love for animals signaled reverence or reflected agricultural dependence. But none of that feels urgent to you now. What feels urgent is the sensation that you've inherited something precious. Something half-buried. A kind of shared absurdity between distant centuries. You think of Ninush writing by oil lamp, glancing up now and then to make sure Buru hadn't wandered off. You think of the neighbor, half amused, half perplexed, trying to find a way to enter her world without interrupting it. And you think of Buru, content, uncomplicated, chewing under the stars, her breath rising in puffs of steam. In your pocket is the final piece of the puzzle, a clay pendant carved with a bull's head, recovered near the temple granaries years ago. The museum never found context for it. Too simple to be ceremonial, too refined to be a child's toy. But now? Now you know. You gently place it on the bench beside you. No case. No tag. Just a tiny totem for anyone who happens to sit here after you. A reminder. That someone, once, wrote something tender and unnecessary. And it mattered. You whisper one final line, not to Ninush, or the cow, or the neighbor, but to the quiet room itself. I carried it. I didn't drop it. And the silence responds like a friend exhaling in their sleep. The next morning, before the museum opens, you take a final walk through the archive's back corridors. No tablet in hand. No pen tucked behind your ear. Just your footsteps, echoing like the last notes of a lullaby you're not ready to stop humming. You pass by rooms where future interns will one day stumble over the same ink-splotched mysteries, make the same overconfident translations, and perhaps, if they're lucky, fall in love with something utterly ridiculous. A cow. A girl. A letter that no one asked for and yet somehow survived. You reach the storage vault where Ninush's folio now lives, cushioned in archival foam, tagged with a barcode that doesn't even hint at the wild tenderness inside. You don't open it this time. You just press your hand to the cabinet, like a promise. Because it's safe now. Because she's been heard. The city outside is waking up. You can hear it, metal shutters rising, street vendors barking for attention, sandals slapping through puddles left from last night's rain. But in here? Stillness. You sit one last time in your little corner of the reading room, where the overhead light always buzzed like a polite mosquito. You pull out your journal, flip to a blank page, and without thinking, begin a letter. To someone. To no one. To whatever thread in the universe decided to tie a girl, a cow, and you together across 4,000 years. You blink like someone with stories in your teeth. I trust you. Not because you ask me to, but because you never ask anything at all. You close the journal. This time, no stone. You'll keep this one. As the morning light spills in through high windows, turning dust into gold, you stand up, stretch, and walk toward the exit, quietly, without drama. Outside, the air smells like cardamom and old clay. Your phone buzzes. Life pulling at your sleeve again. But you let it ring. Just for a moment longer. You tilt your face to the sky. And smile. Because something deeply silly and deeply sacred just came full circle. Because a girl once loved a cow. And now, impossibly, peacefully, that love is yours to carry too. Let your breath slow now. You're no longer walking through museum corridors or sunlit fields. You're just lying here, warm and still, while the echoes of Sumerian syllables fade into the hush of your room. Let the details soften. Let the distant clink of styluses on clay fade to a sleepy murmur. Picture her again, Ninush, scribbling under starlight, her lamp flickering, the cow just outside her window, grazing without a care in the world. The heat of the day has passed. There's only cool stone beneath your fingertips and the rustle of date palms swaying in ancient breezes. You're not solving mysteries anymore. You're simply letting them drift. The way old ink drifts on ancient parchment. The way breath drifts across lips just before sleep. Let go of the scholar in you. Let go of the questions. Let go of time itself. You're part of a quiet lineage now, not of kings or warriors, but of listeners. People who hear the whisper of a letter written long ago and choose to respond not with answers, but with care. You're safe. You're still. And somewhere, in the hush between centuries, a girl and her cow are watching the stars. Sleep, now. Let the story hold you. Let the silence speak. Did you fall asleep before the end? Comment below.